Good evening. You're listening to the Extreme Movie Show. Tonight's episode, Twin Peaks, Season 3, Episode 4. I'm your host, Rob. I am the big winner tonight, getting to discuss a show that I always loved watching, one of the best of all time, in my opinion. And I have the millennial man, the Mr. Young 20-something, Professor Pistol Hill, watching it with me on a first-time basis. I am so jacked up on coffee right now, Pixel. I have to say, my initial impression of this episode, while I had some reservations about episode 3 here in season 3 that we're covering, the return, if you will, from Showtime a few years ago, not having ever watched it before, I was a little disappointed with the last episode with some things, and I let that be known. However, in this episode, I think it's a blast. I think it's a little lighthearted. I think it's a lot of fun, but it's bookended by some really good stuff there, particularly the ending. So overall, I really enjoy this episode probably more than it is good, let's say, and I'm curious to see what your initial impressions are.
Well, I'm here sitting drinking this, damn fine cup of coffee. And I'm so ready to talk about this episode because we discussed last week how episode 1 and 2 were released together, and we believe episode 3 and 4 were also released at the same time. So that way people were supposed to be watching 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it would go one by one for the next few weeks. And I think that is the case because this episode feels like what should have been in the last episode. That was like a prelude to this. And that's honestly how I felt about it. But I suppose the best way to get us through is to go ahead and start. So...
Well, before you do, as far as starting off here, I wanted to point out something because we got a pretty neat message from one of our listeners here on the Extreme Movie Show. Get Steinerized. He's a big fan of the show. You don't know wrestling because you're young something, but the Steiner brothers are one of the best tag teams of all times. Love them, especially Scott Steiner. This guy wrote in and he said, "Hey, did you notice in episode 1? While the couple are at the table making sweet, sweet love," I'm paraphrasing, of course, using my words, "there's a bonsai tree on the table." And I was like, yeah, I remember seeing it when I watched it, but it didn't hit me like, crap, bonsai tree. Let's flash back to Wyndham Earl and the bonsai tree and what a big little arc that was in the last final episodes of season 2 of Twin Peaks. So it was interesting to me because in episode 3, we definitely talked about a lot of little things that we saw here too. And I'm glad that some of our listeners are sending messages and pointing out things that they see, because that is one of the things about Twin Peaks is that Lynch will say, well, there's nothing really to say about it. My thoughts are right there. It's a film. Go watch it. And I agree with you totally as we start this episode, and I'll hand it off to you. This does feel like it picks off from the same episode, like it should just be a run on. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I did not notice the bonsai tree before, and I don't know if that has any connection to our previous season, but we're going to have to wait and see. But getting into this episode 4, we start in Viva Las Vegas in the casino, and we see Dougie Dale, and he is a winner all over. And he's just Dale at this point, but everybody still thinks he's Dougie. So the managers are just staring in shock as he's just pulling levers, entering coins. Hello! And eventually he gets the new nickname, Mr. Jackpots, by the old lady who was like flipping him off earlier. And so she goes up and she begs, Mr. Jackpots, where do I go? And he's looking around, and eventually he sees that flame that seems to open up into the red room. He goes ahead, points over there, and she quickly runs over when a guy named Bill comes to say hi to Dougie. He's like, "Oh, Dougie, I know you. How you doing?" And he is... Dale can't get anything out. He is still mentally deficient, as we could say. But Bill's girl seems to realize something's wrong, and she's like using softer voice. "Do you want to go home, Dougie? Is that what you want?" And
instinct's kicking in.
Yeah, and Dale's like, where's home? And Bill's like, you know where you live, come on, and says the street and the house with the red door. That's how he always finds it. And then he gets pointed to the door. But as he's heading to the door, he gets stopped along the way. And management ends up bringing him into the office. And quickly, he's looking at him, and eventually the manager gets out this large bag as he's saying a few things. Oh, wow, yeah, you sure won. Do you want anything? Do you want to... Do you want a meal? Do you want a room? Do you want to stay? You want some company? Offering him the finer things because he just pretty much screwed them all over because nobody's supposed to win that much. And eventually, the manager, like I said, just gets out a large bag and offers it to him and says that if they can do anything to help, they will. And that's when Dale says, call for help, because that's one of his triggers right there. That's what he's got. But he doesn't know who to call whenever the manager offers. At that point, the manager lets him have a hold on the bag and says that he can have it and they'll call limo to get him home. But he has to promise one thing, that he'll come back again soon. I was expecting like a don't ever come here again, but I don't know. Dale then notices the camera above him, and the manager says, that's right, we're watching you, before we cut.
Yeah, a couple of things I noticed. Little small things. You'd mentioned it in the last episode when we saw this, where you're like, hey, did you notice that person in the background might have looked like such and such? And so I went on like hyperdrive while watching this to see if there's any little Easter eggs, if you will, or things that may come up later in the way it's filmed. And one of the things I noticed is, now that we've all seen Stranger Things, the guy that's a casino head there with the beard, I think he's the guy that plays the scientist or whatever that lets the two shag in his place or whatever after serving him alcohol, because he's that kind of guy. He just seems like it. And then and then a guy who shows up who seems to know Dougie. Now we call the doppelganger Doppeldale. Maybe we could just call this Dougie Dale, I guess, for now. So Dougie Dale, the guy that is recognized by his work associate or somebody, he's the guy that played Earl's friend on My Name Is Earl, I think. But yeah, I was staring at the background trying to see if I see anything. I'm like, nope, just looks like pretty much normal folk and everything else there too. And the name of the casino, do you remember what it is?
Crud. No, I don't. Do you?
It's a silver Mustang. I mean, we see it kind of like a white horse, but I don't know that that's a silver Mustang per se when he has those dream visions or whatever. So that's probably putting too much on it or whatever. But yeah, you're right. His female companion does kind of realize something's wrong. And I guess this is supposed to be played for laughs too, but I still look at the whole clean slate thing as something that's interesting, because if you look at him as like a child or an alien, he's learning at an incredibly accelerated rate, because basically he's just a mirror. He repeats what people say, and that's it. And I think this is fascinating, not just for laughs, but for the fact that if he's acting like a mirror, whoever approaches him, whether it's somebody like this that claims to know him, or like the casino head guy that gives him the bag of money, which would never happen in real life, he just, the whole mirror thing between like your good side and your bad side, I don't know, there's something to that, and I wonder how that's going to develop, because when he's in the office with the guy, it's kind of like he has no, this is where his acting is really good, I have to say, because he really is like a child, where you can almost see where like he might be slightly under the influence, and they've dealt with people like this before, but hey, you won, so we can't do anything, here's your money, but yeah, we want that chance to win it back, because they usually do when you got a whale like this. I've gambled in Atlantic City. I've gambled in Monte Carlo. I have never gambled in Vegas. This to me reminds me of like old Vegas or Reno, from plenty of people I know that have gambled in a lot of places around the world. This just feels kind of warm, cozy, and snug, but also feels like it's real world, because when he looks up at the monitor looking down at him, we go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We know that this is like the part that his boss that we'll talk about here in a moment actually sees and knows where he's coming from. So this is kind of like going back a few minutes just from a different perspective to see what's going on. It's not too much of like, I think, a time jump. And that's definitely a factor in this episode because he gets the limo ride home. They find the red door. I saw a car parked at the end of the street, but I didn't think it was the hitman's that we saw, but it just reminded me of it, the way the camera was shot. But we get introduced to a new character, his wife. And his wife is Janie, and she's played by Naomi Watts, is always just cute as a button to me or whatever. And we know that he's was shagging on a side there a little bit. He's been missing for a couple days, so stuff gets filled in as we get to see her character. So it looks like he's been missing for a couple days. He's got a son, and of course it's a red door, which I don't know, red curtain, who knows? She's furious and all that too. But then of course when they get in, she sees all the money, she freaks out, and her maternal instincts kick in because she decides to draw him a bath. And you mentioned a red balloon
Yeah,
at
balloons all over.
the drug addict's house in that neighborhood, I guess, or I'm assuming it's the same neighborhood. But here there's a red balloon here because it was supposed to be his son's birthday. So I'm going, oh, maybe that drug addict person might come back into play. I don't know, but it doesn't say anything or whatever. And I always thought she was a great actress. I always enjoyed her performances. She seemed real and in the moment. Just good looking enough for whatever role she's been in. Just there's a fearlessness about her. But when we get into the next scene after this, which is absolutely fantastic, all I'm going to say is, and I'll hand this over to you, is that I had to Google this to make sure. But when Gordon Cole walks into this office, he's greeted by somebody for a moment. They have an exchange about an old case files with some small talk. And the person he's talking with is the old Richard Chamberlain that was on the Thornbirds, on 50 Million Things. And you're way too young to even know who this guy is. But this guy was a fixture, I think, from the 70s and the 80s, 90s. He was the TV workaholic kind of guy, solid actor, everything too. And I thought, man, Lynch really does get a lot of nobodies and people we don't know about, but he makes it work for what he wants to do. And Richard Chamberlain, it's a nice touch. So I want to pause and hand this over to you.
Okay, first I'm going to mention a couple things about the previous scene because there's a moment when they get to the red door on Lancelot Court. Don't know if you noticed that name.
No, I missed that. Damn it.
Yes.
Good one.
Also,
between us both, we have to get this.
Yep. But after they get out of the car and Dougie Dale, Dale in his Dougie state, he's just standing there. And the driver says, okay, I'll wait with you. And eventually there's an owl that flies over their heads. And
really?
And the driver says how it spooks him. But that's when the wife comes out. They get inside, and you're right. The scene moves. I'm just so tired of how everyone keeps calling him Dougie. It just doesn't feel natural. Dougie, come on, Dougie. Why would you do this, Dougie?
Yeah.
But overall, the scene does introduce you. The wife does not seem like she's pleasant until she sees the money, and they have to pay. They have to pay somebody back. So,
Dougie's
my favorite line from her, though: "This is the most wonderful, horrible day of my life." But after she gets food, and we cut to Gordon Cole, he talks to a man named Bill as they're waiting for a woman.
That's Mr. Chamberlain. Yep.
Yes,
the head of the FBI, apparently, or something.
So after Bill goes ahead and he leaves the room, Cole sits down, and in the chair next to him, there are roses on the chair. And that's when Denise comes in the room. I didn't expect this at all because we hadn't seen Denise in such a long while. It was perfect. It's great. And that's when Denise says they know that they found Coop, that he's in prison, and how Agent Preston is going with him. And she's kind of suspect in that. Can we say this when her maternal instincts are coming into play?
Duchovny's fantastic in the scene. He nails it.
Yeah, he does. But Cole goes on to say that he's old school, and how back when Denise was going through her situation where she was getting into her full self, how Cole was her advocate. He was there for her, supporting her in front of the entire FBI. Denise says that she knows that when she's saying this, she's just coming at it as a woman. Gordon throws some flattery, saying how there's room for more than one beautiful woman in the FBI. And Denise says, like, oh, you, before she says how she trusts him and wishes him luck. And that's when Cole goes ahead and he leaves. I don't want to. Okay.
What?
This next scene causes me some pain, so I'm going to go ahead and give it to you because there's some good. You'll get
Okay,
into.
I'll take it. Yeah, yeah. I really like the Denise scene here. I think it's done really well. Like I say, Duchovny is great in it. I feel like one of the things I mentioned before when we saw Denise, "Don't Call Me Dennis" back in the day, was that Duchovny played it so understated, and I feel like Duchovny came in here and said, "You know what? I'm not going to add a new riff to it. I'm not going to show better acting chops now that I'm, 30 years removed from the role and I've grown as an actor." None of that bullshit. It's like, this is the role. I know what the role is. Let me do it. And just the way he is, it just reminded me exactly of watching like season one. It was fantastic. I will say that this next scene is silly. It's your boy, Deputy Dumbass, and Lucy. Lucy, of course, is talking to Sheriff Truman. And apparently there's two sheriffs. There was one that was fishing, and I guess one that was out sick or something or whatever. And we never saw Sheriff Truman. But she's talking to somebody on the phone, and she freaks out, and she falls back in her chair because a guy walks in, an older gentleman, holding his cell phone up to her. And apparently this is Sheriff Truman's brother, who's taking his place because the Truman we know, the original Truman, is ill. Apparently the actor was retired at this point, didn't want to be a part of it or something. So I guess this is the real one. That's fine.
I actually gotta correct that a little bit. He was very excited to come back. He was supposed to be signed on, but something happened in his personal life which he had to cancel, and that is why we have new Truman.
Okay, well, life happens, even to actors and actresses. This guy, I forget his name, is an actor you probably recall seeing a lot of stuff, and so he's a solid addition too. What's neat about here is, of course, you get Andy coming in, calling her Punky, as much times as we hear Dougie being called Dougie. But the scene that sets a lot of stuff up to me in this episode, when he walks into the back room, because he talks to this lady Maggie that's working all the current our generation's electronics and the way we would attack a case file. They were using computers and stuff, not as much as 30 years ago. And this guy chimes in about picking somebody up that blew like a really high alcohol level, and it was terrible, and that a boy overdosed at the high school, Dennis Craig or something. I'm only mentioning this because it's the whole thing of there may be red herrings, but there usually are no loose ends. We know that there's only one high school, right? So I'm wondering if we're going to go back to the high school, and this character is saying it like almost like he's not being sexist, but he's trying to point out to the sheriff, to Truman, that I'm the man. And because he keeps basically interrupting, and there's a few people working in the back or whatever. But we'll circle back to that shortly, because the next scene, and it's kind of really a continuation actually. He continues walking through the door because I think he's looking for Hawk, and he says, Bobby, because he sees a deputy walking with his back towards the turnaround, and it is Bobby Briggs, silver-haired fox, aged very well, good-looking man. They talk about this OD kid, about Chinese drugs and stuff, so you just get a chance to hear Bobby. And the only thing I'll say here in this scene is when he first starts talking, his voice is like this, and kind of like, he's been smoking all his whole life. But then it goes back to the Bobby we know from the very first episode where they brought him in for questioning. I loved seeing Bobby in here too, so we get a chance to see more of these characters we've come to know and either like or hate or just know who they are, and it feels good. But of course, there's a continuation with Andy, who's got really horrible hair, because it's not quite a comb over; it's like a comb bunch where it's all balled up there, like a man bun minus the the rapper or whatever, and he's consoling her about how she's created everything except the phone. And he keeps saying he
Yeah.
doesn't understand why it happens again and again, the whole cell phone thing. And I'm telling you, this is his best episode. I'm going to go on record right now and say it, Andy, because there's more I'm going to say later. This is so funny. He's got that voice and he looks like he's 110 years old. And he's like, Punky, I don't know how this keeps happening.
I,
I'll
this is
pause right
actually
there.
the part of the scene that I don't mind. And if you don't mind me going ahead and take you the part where he goes into the room, I actually like this part too. I'm going to hand it to you when I stop liking it, if that's okay.
And that'll be the part I think I love. Go ahead.
That's right. So as Lucy is getting comforted by Andy, Hawk explains to New Truman about the log lady calling him and how the log lady is good to him. This guy named Chad is scoffing hearing about the log lady.
And Chad was the deputy that had pulled over the drunk driver that blew like a .25 or whatever. The guy said that was acting almost sexist, interrupting the one lady. The guy that wants to be the man, he's in here. That's him. Yep.
Yeah, Chad. Of course he's named Chad.
But he doesn't look like a dude, bro. He doesn't. That's the whole problem, is the disconnect. I agree with you.
But at that moment, as he's scoffing about the log lady, New Truman tells him good night.
It's messages from her log. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. She gets messages from the log. Chad says, "Oh, maybe I'll go talk to my pine cone."
This is tremendous. I love this scene. Keep going.
That's when Bobby comes into the room after he has let loose the waterfall. And on the table, they have all the stuff, all the case stuff out, and there's a picture of Laura Palmer, the one we're used to seeing, but it's old and faded. And that's when the music swells. Bobby starts tearing up, and he says he's sorry that the picture just brings back some memories, and asks what's going on. So they mention how this has to do with Major Briggs, and Bobby reveals that Cooper was actually one of the last people to see his dad alive, according to his mom. His mom explains how he stopped by just a few days before Major Briggs died in a fire. Another guy then comes in and says how Wally is there. It's Andy and Lucy's kid, and he wants to pay respects to Sheriff Truman. And now I'm giving it to you. You take it.
All right. So a couple of things about this scene, yeah, let's just go in order. It's the best way I think to tackle it. I really love this whole scene too. I mean, there was the comic element. I think even though they both have aged considerably, and I'm not going to say they haven't aged well, because we all age and things look differently, but someone like Hawks aged very well. Bobby, Briggs, Cooper, even, Lucy and Andy are that couple. And in a show like this that seems more adult feeling, dealing with contemporary times rather than something from 30 years ago, it is kind of nice to see a bedrock of just some basic, simple, nice people that seem to love each other and get along well, no matter how they technically hooked up and how we went through that season 2 roller coaster with Dick Tremaine and was it Nikki the Deviled Boy or whatever. But here, I agree with you. Bobby comes in and he sees Laura Palmer's photo, the one we know. And when that music does play, I'm like, man, this does feel like Twin Peaks. But the neat thing about it, as it continues, is they start talking about stuff. The music shifts from Laura's theme to that, haunting, to chordish kind of thing. That's just really haunting. And I said, man, it really nails it in that first episode. I think when they discovered Laura's body, we hear it. It really brings you back because of the old photo of Laura, Bobby, both themes, Laura's theme and then the sad haunting theme. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of information in this episode too, despite me saying it's goofy, because you're right, we get some stuff here going on, and it's episode 4 and we're like, well, wait a minute, it's been 2 episodes now, we haven't heard anything about Principal Hastings. What the hell else is going on? New characters are being introduced. This is a meaty episode, and unfortunately here with the real Sheriff Truman, the one we know who's ill, when their son comes to pay their respects. I'm just going to say this flat out. You understand the joke behind this scene, right?
The joke behind the son coming to pay the respects?
Okay. So Andy's and Lucy's kid.
Yes.
Do you know who he's supposed to be in this scene? Who?
I'm unsure of what you're saying.
Oh, this is. I think they're just trolling you here. The son's name is Wally Brando. He's supposed to be Marlon Brando. That's why he's talking funny and dressed funny, because this person, and I forget this guy's name, but we've seen him in stuff before. This actor who's playing Andy and Lucy's son, Wally Brando, he's pretending to be Marlon Brando, and he gives this big long-winded speech about traveling cross country and all that stuff. He's doing his best Marlon Brando thing. That's the point. We're being trolled because we're like, otherwise we'd be like, what the F is going on here? This makes absolutely no sense. That's all it is. It's just a troll thing. That's how I'm looking at it. I mean, it's just a really horrible roundabout way of basically showing us that, Andy and Lucy have this kid, and whatever we think of the kid, who's obviously off his rocker, just like mom, just like dad. He's basically saying, hey, I'm giving my best wishes for my godfather, your brother. And it's just a way to explain to us, yeah, we're not going to see the original Truman, just in case there is any doubt, I think, too. But I I just thought it was so bizarre and funny. It had me rolling because the whole exchange that we touched on or whatever like that, she gets messages from along. It's like, well, I think I'll go talk to my pine cone. No, it's just like some of the best dialogue this show's had in a long time. But you're right, it's not a good scene, but I couldn't stop laughing. It's hysterical to me.
I
You
was
get it
at the
now?
point where I was laughing too. Yes, I do.
Right.
And
Again, you're early 20-something. You're not overly familiar with Marlon Brando and how big of a thing Marlon Brando was. That's just how it is. That's why, again, it's interesting talking about how we're two totally different ages and bring a different perspective. But that's the kind of thing that David Lynch likes to do. Like Philip Gerard, the one-armed man from the Quinn Martin show, The Fugitive. I'd be shocked if David Lynch didn't have somebody from The Invaders or somebody else in one of these episodes. But anyway, that scene ends. Go ahead.
It's funny you mentioned the one-armed man, because the next day we see Dougie Dale, and he is staring at a green suit that I guess his wife has laid out for him. It's not long before we cut to the Red Room, and the one-armed man is circling around. Then we shift back to Dale, and then he looks over to a chair in the room and stands up from the bed slowly, as reality is starting to shift between his room and the Red Room below. And we can see the one-armed man. He looks up and says, "You can see me, can't you?" He says how he was tricked, shows the gold ball that Dougie Dale, the real Dougie, became, and now that one of them must die, meaning one of the Dales in that world. From there, Dougie Dale then holds his crotch because he really has to go to the bathroom. His wife pushes him towards it, and he learns the wonders of peeing. Yes. After that, he looks at the mirror, and he after you can hear the flush in the background. He touches the glass, and he's just staring at himself before the wife comes in and helps get him dressed. She says how everything is pretty much too big for him, that only the suit that he was wearing yesterday seems to fit, and that's when she leaves the tie around his neck for him to do, because she can't do it before she goes down to start preparing breakfast. It's when we see Sonny Jim. That's just a stupid name. I'm sorry I have to say that now. But Sonny Jim sees him, smiles, gives him a thumbs up, in a very Cooper-like way, if you
This is
ask me.
cool. This is a great scene. Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest. That does not look like it could be Dougie's kid. Like, I mean, the Dougie before he became Dale. It doesn't look like it could be his kid to me. The skin tones don't seem to match.
I don't know either, but I thought the exact same thing. It's just okay. Something's, yeah.
But then we quickly get to the kitchen. Dale is wearing the tie on his head as he stares at the plate of pancakes that his kid is eating. Sonny Jim then gets up and pulls out his dad's chair and leads him to sit down on it. Dale gets a stack of pancakes set in front of him, and he just stares for a long moment and tries to figure out how it works. And ultimately, Sonny Jim pours some syrup on, and that's when Dale successfully uses a fork. Yes! We give him a round of applause. That's when his wife comes over and gives him coffee. And at the word coffee, you've never seen this man more excited. He quickly gets up and he's like, coffee. And he picks it up and takes a sip immediately and it spits it out. If you look at my little icon right here, you can see exactly the face he makes after taking a sip. I guess it was a little too hot. And now I pass it back to you.
Yeah, I like this scene too because I agree with you immediately. That was the first thing I thought. There's just no way this kid's supposed to be his. I guess because it just didn't look like it. Even he's got dark hair and dark eyes. It just I don't know why. I got that same vibe too. Maybe it's because almost everybody's cheated on everybody here in Twin Peaks, and that's the stories. Everybody has a secret dark life, and so maybe we'll find something out about the wife here, Janie. But we'll see. And I thought it was neat too because again, it's like that blank slate. Things are coming back to him, and of course, we remember the big speech he gave that when people start still learning who this guy was when he was back in Twin Peaks in season 1 about the taste of syrup, hitting pancakes. There's no other quite taste like it. And that's when he was discovering coffee. And so, yeah. And I popped over two things. One, she sets the coffee cup down. She's like, okay, here's your coffee. And we're all like, yeah, he's getting ready to have the coffee. This is going to be cool. This is going to be badass. But the coffee itself, it says Dougie's coffee on it. You know how like we have like our special cup of coffee when we want our drink or something in it. I thought that's kind of badass. Behind them, though, in several of these scenes as they're, cutting back and forth from different points of view, there is an orange owl, like a cookie jar or something on the table behind them too. So I'm like, there you go. Makes me think that the pineapple that was in all the episodes of Psych, they got the idea from the owl. And here I'm not sure, but that was something they did. But you definitely can clearly see it. And the coffee cup says, I am Dougie's coffee, which I think is just really neat. The music that's playing, I just have to point this out. It's Take 5, Dave Brubeck Quartet. It's considered one of the most famous instrumental and best jazz pieces of all time. I just love the fact that it's playing. We've never heard that before, but Angelo Badalamenti, or whatever his name is, he's still responsible for the whole music, just like it was in season 1 or 2. So I'll go, oh, he changed some stuff up here now that just seems to work. It's a nice piece. It's neat that we get so excited like a child about the coffee and all that too. So we're left kind of happy before we actually start getting into the serious part of the episode as we kind of wind down here in the third act. We get to see basically a change over here to a lady that we haven't seen in a while, Mrs. Talbot. With Mrs. Talbot, I always think of like, the werewolf story and all that. But she's showing her chief and the detective these results of this body that we had found a few episodes ago in Ruth Davenport, that cookie lady's apartment, where the body was decapitated, but the body was somebody else's. And so the bottom line is hey, we've got issues because it's got a military block on the search that we're running on a computer. So I'm like, okay, this is tying into the stuff that we already kind of knew happened, because we already know that, Albert's going to be, traveling there with Cole, and we're going to see what's going on too, because this is a quick scene before we get to Cole and, Albert and Preston, the lady, comment too. So What do you have to say about this quick scene?
All I have to say about this quick scene is that I am intrigued in what it could be, because if it's locked by military access, whose body could it be, and is it in connection with anybody that we know? But we're going to have to wait and see about that. Do you want to take this last scene?
Well, we see, Cole and Albert and is it Preston? Is it Tamara? Whatever her name is. I think it's
Tammy.
Tammy.
They
Yeah,
call her Tammy.
Tamara. But she's exotic, so I'm gonna say Tamara. But they land there in South Dakota where they're going, and they get in the big black car with the guys that have the earpieces, typical FBI outfit, and they're driving. And there's a couple of neat things in this scene too. One, when she walks out, she's tall, lean, leggy. At least she appears tall. She's probably 5'6", maybe 5'7", which starts getting tall, I think, for a woman, especially when they're thin and built. They're driving down, the plains of South Dakota on the road, and we didn't really get to see a lot of Albert being a jerk. He's had some interesting dialogue, and he wasn't actually in Twin Peaks a lot. He'd come and go a little bit. We didn't see much of him in season 2, but here he's obviously older, and him and Cole are talking and about how she's got her head out the window, how she gets car sick, and I guess it's supposed to be funny too or whatever like that because he's still having to talk loud. Cole is and all that. The guy's like, "You want me to pull over?" And she's like, "No, drive on." But when they pull up, I'm just gonna say it. When she walked out of the airport and into the car and out of the car, she's walking like a model. She's doing this little hip swagger thing. It's a legitimate walking technique, or she's not walking like a professional straight ahead. It's very seductive, but her face is not acting that way, being alluring. But they meet the police that supposedly have picked up Cooper, and they go in to set things up to talk to him or whatever. And this we know it's a Doppelgänger, right? And even though there's like cocaine and a gun and literally a dog leg that we see chopped off or whatever, there's a good line by Albert saying, "Well, where's the cheese and crackers?" or whatever. That's kind of his thing. But this feels dark. The room is dark. It's serious. They get his mug shot and his so-called fingerprints. They got him at 75, 76 inches, which is what, 6'3", 6'4". The guys leave and they get ready to go talk to Dougie. I'll pause here because this literally is pretty much the last thing to talk about in case there's something you wanted to add.
Well, yeah, I do want to add something. They talk about how the thing he ended up puking up, which we said looked like cream corn, was toxic. So toxic that it made the men sick to go near it. And how they're running tests to see what it could be, because they don't know. To get him out of there was a mess. But other than that, I don't know where the dog leg comes in.
Yeah, maybe it's a red herring. Maybe it's not. We don't know.
Yeah. As for this last part, oh man, I love this.
Okay, go ahead, take it.
So, as they sit down to talk to Doppelgänger, it lists, and as I said before, according to some of the things I've seen, I haven't read ahead, but some people refer to Doppelgänger as Mr. C. That's their way of distinguishing between the two. Mm-hmm. So, as the screen lifts, we see Doppelgänger, and he gives a thumbs up. And I wrote this down in my notes because it's very specific, and I'm not sure if this is on purpose, but to me it sounds like it's very good to see you again, old friend. Yeah. It's been a long time. And he has this very monotone kind of tone to his voice. And I think that he
sounds like the lead singer from Typo Negative, who's passed away. Bow to me, dead man's girlfriend. Yeah, it's exactly how it is. It's really deep.
Like I said, in that first line, it sounds like you're like it's backwards, like how it is in the Red Room, which is where he's from. But he quickly switches to regular speech, and he says how he's missed him. we can tell it's a lie. And even Doppeldale, for how he acts, he's off. I think that what happened last time really took a lot out of him. He says that for the past years that he's been gone, that he's been undercover and working with Philip Jeffries. He says that he needs to be debriefed. And at that moment, Cole tries to go and ask another question, but that's when Doppeldale just repeats himself that he needs to be debriefed. He says he's left messages, and he looks to Albert. And the messages were for Jeffrey to know that he's safe. Cole says that they're working to bring Cooper home, and Doppeldale says he never really left home. He then gives him a thumbs up as Cole says goodbye, and door shuts. At that moment, Cole asks the officers if they have given him his call yet. And Gordon says to give him his private phone call, and he wants to hear all about it. At that moment, we get to where Albert reveals that Philip Jeffries was a former FBI agent. And Cole asks if Tammy is wearing a wire. And she says, yes, you told me to. And that's when Cole says to go wait in the restaurant. And as she leaves, Albert says that after watching her walk away, that he's feeling a little bit better. Cole, at that moment, turns down his dial. This is the first time we've ever seen him do this.
Turns up his dial.
Oh, turns up his dial. That's
so
right.
They can whisper. It's at the most sensitive level.
Yes. And he is quietly asking what that reaction was, because I noticed it too in the scene, how Albert was, his facial expressions, though they were few, how it came whenever he brought up Philip Jeffries. And Albert explains that he gave the information to keep in touch with Philip Jeffries. And Cole at that moment says he doesn't like this. They both agree that something's wrong. And Albert at that moment shifts and moves his feet, and that bothers Cole. He says, please stop. This is turned up. I can hear everything. Cole says that Doppeldale didn't greet him properly, if Albert knows what he means, and he hates to admit it, but he doesn't understand anything that's going on. He asks if Albert does, and Albert looks at him a moment and says the words, Blue Rose. Cole says they need one person to see Cooper before they do anything. And Albert asks Albert if she knows where she lives. And Albert says that he doesn't know where she lives, but he knows where she drinks. And that's when we cut to the Roadhouse. There's a band playing, and roll those credits.
Yeah, I like this scene because it really closed us on a kind of a darker level than a lot of the levity we had in this episode. Which for me really worked. And we weren't the biggest Lucy and Andy fans, but it works with what they're doing, and it's funny. Sometimes people seem to lose what little they have in terms of a role. They can get a little tired or played out, and I think it was just enough for us. Hopefully we don't have to see a lot of them, but it makes sense with whether we're at Twin Peaks. It makes us feel like we're there in Twin Peaks because, again, we've been in Vegas, we've been on the other side of South Dakota, we've been in the Philly office technically, we've been in Twin Peaks. We're globetrotting, or really United States trotting around here in one episode, so it's kind of cool. What I liked about this episode, or this particular scene I should say first, is that Tamara, she's told to go wait in the diner that's right next to the place, and the camera obviously pans down from from like the back of her all the way down, so you can see obviously her hips swaying as she's walking. And I told you before earlier that she's walking very deliberately, and obviously everyone has a certain type of walk, but even the way she acts, because she, Cole's like, "Hey, you're wearing a wire," and he's like, "Yeah, because you told me to." And she's all pissy, she's real indignant. She's got her hand turned a certain way that you hold it on your hip, like if you're a model. I mean, she's like, oh, huffy puffy and walking off, and it's just so blatantly a sexist scene to me in terms of the way it's shot, and I have no problems with it. I don't think it's meant to be anything particular, but it's a little bit of levity because remember when he was sitting in there with Denise, um, and Denise is like, "Hey, I know your type, barely 30, just come out of the program or whatever." That alludes to Cole's been involved in something like this before, and I don't know if it might have been related in somehow, some pattern, some way. Because if we go back to the whole relationship thing, Cole, was Cooper's boss, but Cooper supposedly was influenced a lot by Wyndham Earl, and the whole thing with Wyndham Earl, supposedly, Cooper and his wife and Wyndham Earl's wife, hooked up and fell in love. It was a big love affair. That's why he wouldn't get with Audrey. And I just go, well, is there some sort of development about Cole that we're going to get in this season that we haven't? Because we got him as a one-note guy coming in, talking really loud, being kind of goofy and stuff like that. And he's been anything but to me in this whole season 3. He's very stark, serious. It's a very intimate moment between these two guys. It's just nothing but their headshots going back and forth. And of course, there's this, even though it's like lunchtime, there's this gigantic blue filter over everything. So of course they mentioned Blue Rose. And Philip Jeffries was the guy that was played by David Bowie, if you remember, in Fire Walk with Me, when he came in, and then he seemed to have disappeared because he'd been missing for a couple of years.
Oh my
And he
God.
walked in the office and then left. So this is tying in some of these older loose ends. And we mentioned before how with Fire Walk with Me, how, at least from my perspective, I really liked a lot, but some people hate it. Some people like season 1 and Fire Walk with Me because they say, "Oh, that's really Twin Peaks. Season 2 is nothing. It's a joke." And I think there's a lot to season 2 that we can talk about. We weren't crazy about, but some of it I still think was decent. But this, like I say, for the lightness that we got for a big part of this episode, this ends kind of serious. And to see Albert, like to your point, being very stern, and Cole being that way too, and the whole thing about him turning his ear all the way up to be sensitive so they could just sit there and whisper and talk about things. It's just simple and it's effective. And so a lot of these choices that they've made in this episode work. And so to me, that's why I just kind of giving you my final thoughts here. I really liked this episode a lot. I think it was a lot of fun. Some of the dialogue was really great. I'm starting to get very confident about the 4 episodes because the first 2 were strong, but I was hoping that wasn't just because I wanted to be good. Then I was questioning myself with episode 3 because I felt it was a little but to your point, this feels like it was supposed to have been together with the episode 3 put out at one time, which it probably was. So that makes sense. But yeah, I really like this a lot. And there's so much we've got here in 4 episodes, and we've got 14 more to go. A lot of meat on this bone here, too. This is just really living up to season 1 standards, in my opinion. Final thoughts for you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree because there's just so much information that we're being delivered. I think episode 3 and going on to watch this episode, which I'll admit now, I did.
I have not, so yeah.
Yeah, I know you took the break. I could not. So I made sure I had my notes all down and I have it separated in my mind so that way we could talk about this. This episode is really strong, and I think paired with the other, it works out just fine. I think it's how Lynch intended, which is how you should watch things, I guess. And I'm just looking forward to the next one.
Let me ask you this real quick. We get a different band. It's a girl band, 3 of them playing very sparingly, some instruments and some machines, and that's it. And very long-legged, good-looking, nobody that we know. You're not a fan of this at all, and I don't think obviously this will have anything to do with the rest of the season. I may be wrong saying that, but still not a big fan of that, right?
No, I really don't care for this kind of ending. I guess I'm a stickler for the old fashioned ways. And whenever they used to do twists in the previous season 2, because they didn't in season 1, in season 2, it always impacted the episode in a way. This does not. It feels very random, and I understand that Lynch it has a huge part in the sound development of this show, and he
Yes.
likes music. So I understand him wanting to highlight some of these bands, I guess, but at the same time, this isn't Twin Peaks.
I don't know what they could do, because I guess the only justification I would say in agreeing with you right there, but from a different point of view, is that, you know, Laura's gone. It's been 30 years, so we don't need to see her anymore, and we don't need to see her at the end of the credit scene. So
I hate to
and they're
throw
all
this.
playing in the same place, so I don't know if that'll mean anything. Probably not, but no, I think we're making too much out of it. But I was just curious about it, because yeah, that definitely seems like it's the pattern now. Going to be.
If I were to pick something, I think that you're right. It's like 30 years later. I would have had like Laura's picture in like a storage area. It's dark, barely lit. You can see the picture, but it's kind of ominous as you're staring and the music is playing, maybe in the distance, something like that. Maybe some people would find that hokey, but I would have preferred that to this.
Okay, fair enough. Well, there you have, ladies and gentlemen. Twin Peaks Season 3, The Return, episode number 4 in the bag here. Join us next week when we do episode 5 of Twin Peaks. We're looking forward to going over that. Keep those comments coming. Keep those conspiracy theories and stuff. Remember, this is a first watch for Professor Pixel and myself, your host here, Rob, at the Xtreme Movie Show. So we don't know what to expect. He's the young millennial man. I'm the 80s guy, and we are just kind of touching base and seeing what this is going to be like, because I maintain it's still one of the best shows of all time. You know, I've seen a lot of shows, but here on the Extreme Movie Show, we like to cover movies primarily. If you got something you'd like us to cover with the Halloween season coming up, we're definitely going to be doing a few additional horror type movies coming up. It'd be neat to cover that as well. But yeah, Twin Peaks, drink it in, man. All right. For everybody involved here in Extreme Movie Show, Professor Pixel, this is your host, Rob, saying good night. And as always, stay extreme. Good night, everybody.